Good afternoon, everyone. It is March 8th. Going to talk about what's going on the battlefield in Ukraine. Somewhat of a slowdown taking place. Initially, after Avdiivka, which we all know is in this region right here, the Russians were pushing very hard. They initially wanted to drive on four axes, as I said before, in this region here, near Bakhmut, and then up between Kupiansk and Lyman here. And so that's what they were doing. However, they seem to have run out of gas, and not like gas in the physical sense, but they just have run out of capability to continue driving, specifically in the Avdiivka region. So we'll zoom in on that and kind of talk about what's going on here. So there have been some discussions from Russian commanders. There have been some videos posted from Russian commanders where they are reaching back to their command centers, their higher headquarters, asking for more ammunition, specifically artillery ammunition. Now, originally, the Russians had an artillery ammunition superiority over the Ukrainians. That is why they were able to take Avdiivka in such a kind of a big swath of territory move, where they were able to just drive through under the cover of heavier artillery fire. Ukraine is having to conserve their artillery for very targeted, specific areas. And as we saw recently, one of the HIMARS was destroyed. I mean, granted, it's always bad to see Western equipment be destroyed, but the fact of the matter is these HIMARS have been operating for years now on the battlefield. And the fact that only one has been destroyed is simply astonishing at the capability and tactics of the Ukrainians. The reason the Russians are slowing down is because they themselves have seen a dramatic decrease in artillery. And the reason for that is because the artillery they've been getting from North Korea and Iran has slowed down themselves. Now, the Iranians are having to focus more on helping out their regional partners in Hamas, Hezbollah. With that being said, they also are preparing for potential escalations in the region, especially with the Houthis killing those multinational sailors off the coast of Yemen. Now, with regard to North Korea, over the last 2 months, there's been a significant decrease in the shipments of artillery. So Russia was plussed up. It allowed them to get through and take Avdiivka. But since then, the push that was initially, it actually kind of bubbled out here. The Ukrainians were able to drive back as the artillery seems to have equalized. It seems to be there is an equal amount of non-artillery on this battlefield. And when that happens, the superior tactics, the superior non-artillery equipment, such as better tanks, better fighting vehicles on the battlefield, means that Ukraine can slowly chip away back. I don't think they're going to do that. They don't want to extend themselves back to try to retake Avdiivka, nor will they do that across the rest of the battlefield. This is definitely an attritional fight still for Ukraine. But the fact is that they are able to take back some of the territory that the Russians had originally grabbed, especially in Avdiivka, means that the Russians just don't have the capability to conduct large-scale combined arms actions. And what I mean by combined arms is an action where you have all facets of the battlefield coordinated. You have air assets, you have rocket artillery, you have standard artillery, you have armor, you have infantry, you have not just infantry, you have mounted infantry and dismounted infantry integrated with logistics, communications, intelligence. They're just not able to do that at this point. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that they're using poorly trained conscripts as their infantry, but they have a lot of them. So again, this isn't like a turning of the tables once again for the Ukrainians in favor. It just means that the battlefield, the advancements that the Russians had made, specifically in Avdiivka and actually in other places too, such as Bakhmut and Lyman, are slowing across the entire battlefield and even reversing when it comes to other parts such as Avdiivka. Now, we originally talked about Robotyne being a portion where Russia wanted to close this salient off. They have failed in doing so, at least in the short term. Again, this is a problem of poorly trained troops and lack of artillery because North Korea has turned the tap off. And if you saw the news recently, North Korea conducted a massive battery of quote unquote exercise fires into the ocean to show like a display of force because South Korea and the United States are conducting joint operations together. And that's kind of why we're seeing the North Koreans turn the tap, not necessarily off, but significantly down. The flow of artillery going into Russia is is definitely reduced compared to where it was. This may be because there just isn't enough in North Korea, but also it could be North Korea is kind of holding it on in case they are potentially thinking of doing something, which I'm not entirely convinced they will, but nonetheless, it's not going to Russia, meaning that we're seeing a bit of a stagnation here, and it's becoming who can manufacture and who can supply the battlefield faster and with more. And because Ukraine has Western backing, if the European Union, which has already committed shells, the Czech Republic has done the same thing. They found hundreds of thousands of shells. And if the United States can provide its portion of the funding into the American economy to build that ammunition and start sending it rapidly to Ukraine, we could once again see a turning of the tables. Will this new round of funding from the EU and the United States turn into victory for Ukraine? I doubt it. But again, it's a time-driven battlefield where we want Russia to be stretched out over time, losing men and equipment, making it more and more painful for them to be here. And that is what Ukraine is trying to do. And still, they're quite successful at doing that.